everyone, and welcome back to a year in the TikTok of ProfBrainFever. So I don't know how many of these I'm gonna watch with him talking about fat suits and fat roles being played by fat actors and all of that, just because we've seen so much of it. This is the one video that I've reviewed before starting this video, and it is touching that topic. I figure we'll get it out of the way, and then I don't know how much I'll cover of these same talking points after this. So let's just go ahead and get this out of the way.
Is it self-serving to want a positive portrayal of a fat character that doesn't end in weight loss or death? Is it self-serving to want a fat character to be portrayed by a fat actor and not a thinner actor in a fat suit? Is it self-serving to want a story that centers a fat character to either be written by, directed by, or performed by someone even approaching the level of fatness of that main character? If that's self-serving, fuck it, I'm self-serving. No one else is serving us.
Seems a bit.
I gotta be honest, I do think it's a bit self-serving, and for these reasons. Like, you want a fat story where the character is fat and it doesn't result in weight loss or death. To a certain extent, there are fat characters in other movies that don't die. The character that in The Whale was super morbidly obese. There's no, like, I don't mean to be cruel and I don't mean to be morbid, but there isn't a whole lot of other narratives you can tell for someone of that size. Weight loss or death, there's not. Otherwise, the movie would just be them in their house, because people that big are pretty much housebound. So to insist something that doesn't really exist in reality, and I really don't mean to be cruel, and I don't mean to be a bitch, but it is self-serving. Now, for the fat role being played by a fat actor, that's also a bit self-serving, considering that you want someone that matches the level of morbid obesity. Like, this isn't just an overweight actor playing an overweight character. The whale was the main character in The Whale was super morbidly obese. It's just not realistic. So yeah, I do say that it is a level of self-serving, and this. So if it's self-serving, no one else is serving us. Like, it's just such a victim narrative, like most FA talking points, that it's like, what do you mean you're not being served? Do you realize that, like, there's spandex and everything? And I mean, I know this is a little off the general topic, but not, I mean, actually, even if we focus only on, like, movies and stuff, having the fat character as the butt of a joke has gone out for the most part, at least from what I've seen. There might be some exceptions for a movie like Deadpool, but that's about it. I don't know. There's a lot more fat narratives out there. Anyone that's been on my community posts knows that there's a middle grade book written in verse about a fat girl, and it uses some FA rhetoric, taking up space, fat phobes, that sort of thing, and that's just from, like, the first 5 pages. And I actually plan on getting that and reading that, but, like, my point is that there's more narratives that are fat positive coming out. And the thing is that I think I'm not against, I want to be clear, I'm not against fat positive. I mean, what I mean by that is, like, not portraying fat characters in a negative light. I'm not against that. I'm not against the positive portrayal of fat people in media. I just think that it's a little bit of a narrow road to walk, because there's a difference between, and I think, like, Drop Dead Diva did it pretty well. I think Suki from Gilmore Girls was a good example of, it's them living their lives, and sometimes, yes, they have to deal with assholes that will make unnecessary comments towards them, and they can handle it with grace, and there can even be this kind of vicarious fuck you aspect if they're able to tell the person off and stuff. Like, I think those are all great. It's when it starts to get into the realm of one, you should, like, everyone should find me as attractive as a model, basically, a skinny model. Or I'm 100% healthy. It's those things that where it's like starts to be more iffy, and I don't really think for a character like the main character in The Whale, I don't think that there's any way to portray that wholly positively simply because of how big their size is. Like, there's, if you're still mobile and stuff as a fat person, there's, I think, positive portrayals that can happen. If you are housebound, bedbound, I think that the more socially responsive narrative would be like, one, get help before you reach to this point, and two, you can dig yourself out of it. Like, I think those are the kind of two narratives that have to exist. But that's me.
Do you think that Gwyneth Paltrow is happy? Because I have my doubts.
So, I think that there's something going on with Gwyneth Paltrow that I'm not prepared nor qualified to get into. But I find it interesting that this was tagged as fat acceptance. I also don't think that... I think this is one of those circumstances where it's like, you guys don't like it when people comment on your stuff, on your eating habits, on your whatever, and you're kind of equating this to happiness. And it's kind of like, you're equating it to happiness, but when someone says, oh, are you healthy, that's offensive. And you're asking this person who is not eating well, who also has a what I believe to be a form of disordered eating, if she's happy in a very pointed way. I'll be honest, I don't think that Gwyneth Paltrow is happy, but that's not my... It's not something that I think about a whole lot. It's not something... I don't really like to look at someone's lives and ask, like, are they happy? Their lives are their lives. If they need help, if they're not happy and they need help, then they can reach out for it. But otherwise, it's kind of... I very much get into not my business sort of mode. And I don't know, I just kind of feel a little bit of hypocrisy in this, because the question feels kind of pointed, but if the shoe were on the other foot and someone was taking a video of a fat person eating, saying, do you think they're really happy? You guys would be up in arms. And it's not that I necessarily even have a problem with his commentary on this, and I think I kind of made it seem like, oh, how could you do this? And that's not necessarily my point. It's not even the commentary that I have the issue with. It's that if the shoe were on the other foot, it's a level of hypocrisy here, because you guys get so up in arms over people judging fat people, but you have no problem with judging someone at the other end of the spectrum. It's just one of those things, it's just one of those things where it's like, if you don't like it being done to you, then perhaps you shouldn't do it to others.
This person is asking in my comments, it's not like Brendan Fraser was throwing slurs and saying every fat person is like this, or that The Whale was saying that, so how is it fatphobic? It's fatphobic because this is the only story that Hollywood will tell about fat people. And not only that, they won't even let fat people tell it. They will have thin people tell this story, sad fat person either dying or losing weight. That's the story that Hollywood wants to tell, and they won't even let actual fat people tell it. They will have a thin director.
So actually, I kind of disagree with this. They're like, this is the only narrative that Hollywood will go. And granted, this was not a U.S. movie, but there was a movie, I think it was called Red Shoes, where it was a version of, I want to say it was Snow White. I think it was a version of Snow White. And there were these magic shoes, and it was portrayed in the trailer as, oh, she gets these shoes and she magically loses weight, she gets a lot of, she looks much more conventionally attractive, and people were fucking up in arms over it. I remember this big fucking controversy around this movie, except the movie wasn't like that at all. It ended up being very much a body positive narrative. And while the main character was fat, she had no qualms about her fatness. She was very comfortable in her skin, and the seven dwarf characters each had their own thing that they were insecure about, that the movie was about them overcoming. But when the original story was about this fat girl that was magically losing weight, people were up in arms over it. People were not happy about it. People were, and it wasn't just like fat acceptance, because that wasn't the like rhetoric that I saw so much. It was people were genuinely upset of really another, princess movie all about weight and image and looks. And so, granted, I don't pay that much attention to mainstream media, but there have been fat characters that have not lost weight. They weren't the center of attention, but there have been fat characters that haven't had to lose weight or anything for their story. The Whale is different because of the scope and the scale of the obesity of the character. Fat, there's a, like I've said before, there's a big difference between the level of fat where you are just like it shows on you, but you're still mobile and you can still do like an everyday job sort of thing. And then there's the super morbidly obese, where that person is housebound or bedbound or whatever. I think grouping them both is a disservice to even the point that you're trying to make, even the fat acceptance movement. Like I think ignoring the issues around super morbid obesity and viewing that it's like, well, why is it either weight loss or death? Because that's kind of your options at that point. Let's take a look at reality of the situation, specifically for the super morbidly obese. I'll let him finish.
And a thin writer and a thinner actor put on a fat suit rather than hire an actual fat person to tell a story. Maybe because fat people don't want to tell that story. Because fat people have other stories than that. But not according to Hollywood. And that is one of the many reasons why The Whale is fatphobic.
Alright, I have nothing really more to say on that. They're like, fat people have other stories to tell. Again, I really have to question at what level of obesity. At what level of obesity do they have more stories to tell? Because I'm really curious about someone who can't leave the house, is housebound or bedbound, or both. What story do they want to tell about someone of their size that doesn't involve, that has like a positive spin on it and doesn't involve death or weight loss? It's a genuine question.
I personally have a hard time believing that anyone thinks that The Whale is hard-hitting. Hard-hitting in what way? It's just fatphobic. It is just Fat Phobia, the movie. And had they not used a fat suit, it still would have been fatphobic because the...
So just so you know, the comment that he's just running to says, do you think the movie would have been as hard-hitting seeing a regular fat guy, maybe 300, 250 pounds, in his role?
Script is fatphobic. The central concept, sad fat guy kills himself because he's fat, uses fatness to kill himself. Fatness is deadly. All that is fatphobic garbage. And maybe it's hard-hitting to thin people who are afraid that one day they might be fat. It's not hard-hitting to fat people. It's just anti-fat garbage.
So, disclaimer, I haven't read it, but haven't seen it. But some of you have seen it, and in the comments you guys kind of let me know there's a lot more going on than just, sad fat guy kills himself because fat is bad. Like, from what I understand, there's this kind of ongoing, like, every character in there has their own problems, and it's almost like every character has their own addiction that they're dealing with. The main character is just the most visible in his addiction. From my understanding, there were multiple layers, and so I think this is kind of my problem with not just fat acceptance, but a lot of social justice movements in general, is when there's something kind of wrong with maybe the way a film was handled, and I'm not saying that for The Whale, but there have been other movies where it's like, oh, this one comment completely ruined the movie. It's like, can you see the benefits of the movie excluding that? It doesn't mean you have to like the movie. If that was enough to make you dislike the movie, then that's a matter of personal preference, and it is what it is. But I have movies and books and TV shows and stuff that do something on occasion that I don't like or that bugs me, but I can see the value of the story being told in spite of that. And this is one of the things where it's like not it's almost like because they don't agree 100% wholly with everything in the piece of media that they are consuming, then it is automatically bad. And I think that is such a dangerous and quite frankly stupid and moronic mindset to have. If you can't differentiate the issue you have with the film without it completely destroying the value of the story being told, like, are you serious that you can't see any value at all in something that has an aspect of something that you disagree with? It just, I think there's something to be said for acknowledging, so we acknowledge being critical of media that we like. Can you also say that media that you dislike and you're actively being critical of it, can you also acknowledge its good points? You know?
Unfortunately, I'm going to take this moment to announce I don't think I'm going forward with my podcast about fatness and anti-fat bias and fat phobia and fat suits and fat characters in media. And there's kind of two reasons for it. The first is time. When I came up with the idea, with the whole concept, I was a stay-at-home dad, but now I'm a stay-at-home dad who also has a part-time job. And it's just daunting thinking of doing any kind of podcast, let alone the research-intensive podcast that subject would require of me to do it any sort of justice. The other reason has to do with mental health. I made, as you may be able to tell from my page, far too many videos about a certain movie and its fat suit recently, and I don't intend to stop.
Well, at least he's self-aware about how much he talks about the whale. The comment he's responding to says, don't do it for no other reason than you still have to get your previous podcast idea about fat characters going. I don't know exactly what this is referring to, and I don't really think we need to watch the rest of this, because I don't think that he's just explaining why he's apparently not making his podcast. Something that's worth noting, though, is that this was from March. Just last month in September, I was looking for his podcast to maybe do like a one-off video on it, especially for like the December project thing that I'm trying. I don't know if I'm going to be able to have all the videos ready for that in time. But he does have like a Twitter for it saying it's coming soon, so I don't know if that was before this or if it was made after this. Maybe he found like you could juggle things more. I don't know if he's going to make a podcast or not. I will be keeping my eye on it and seeing how things unfold, but that's where we are right now. So we'll just move on. Since now we know he's apparently not making the podcast, at least not right now. There's no episodes out or anything, so we know why. We know why he didn't make it.
Spoilers, if you haven't caught up on...
Oh, man. Bluey!
Is Bluey fat phobic? Go back and watch the full clip. I never thought I'd have to make this video. A couple things for clarity's sake before I go on. Number one, almost all media holds anti-fat bias. I find it hard to see any that doesn't. If a show or a movie doesn't have an anti-fat bias, it's almost certainly not addressing fatness in any way. So this is not surprising. And full disclosure, I am not in Australia. I have not seen the full video. I've only seen the clip supplied in that other video. So there could be context I am missing. That being said, one of the fantastic things that Bluey does as a show is give the parents who are watching relatable, realistic moments from the parent characters on the show, Bluey's parents, Bandit and Chili. Because of the culture we live in, almost every adult knows what it's like to step on a bathroom scale and feel disappointed or upset or angry about the number that they see. But this is a kids' show, And as relatable as that might be for the adults, we have to look at what is that moment in the show teaching the children who are watching. If you want to make an episode about the importance of exercise and finding time to exercise in a busy life, that's fantastic. That's wonderful. But what this episode seems to be doing is saying that the only metric for health, the only metric for should I exercise, is are you fat or not, is the number on that.
So, as someone who works with, and given that Bluey, I believe, is technically geared towards the kindergarten preschool set, although I understand that has a wide appeal. I'm not dissing anyone who's older that genuinely likes Bluey, because there's a number of middle schoolers that just like watching the show. I'm just talking about what the intended audience was. But even if we put aside the intended audience, and I've only seen the clip as well, I have not seen the entire show. Bluey just isn't my media of choice. But just from looking at that, I wouldn't say that kids would gain anything negative about the connection of body and weight with that. It was a parent that stepped on a scale, sighed, and then went back to brushing his teeth. If we're just looking at that clip in a nutshell, which is what ProfBrainFever here is doing, because he hasn't seen the show either, that he's making a large assumption when any child, I would say at least under 3rd grade, possibly under 4th, meaning like 8 or 9 and under, that was entirely too subtle for them to pick up anything significant on. The character didn't express dissatisfaction with their weight verbally. There was no number shown. There was no sign of them like grabbing fat or something to kind of give a greater sense. I think that was very much for the parents, because I think the way it was utilized was entirely too subtle for children to pick up on. Just putting that out there. Don't get me wrong, kids can pick up on other things if that was like an ongoing theme in the episode, but that particular instance was a bit subtle for kids, in my opinion.
Scale. And if kids see that, that is what they will focus on, and that can lead to kind of horrible things. I'm talking bullying.
So, not necessarily. It kind of depends on how it was framed, at least for me. Generally, kids will latch on to what the character did in response to that. If the character sees that their weight was not, and this is assuming they would even pick up on that in the first place, but we'll pretend that it was a bit more obvious, and that it was clear that the character was dissatisfied with their weight and that it was too high. And what have you. If the character spends a good portion of the time moping and being sad, that is how the kids will internalize how to handle an unsatisfying number on the scale. If the character sees that and then decides to eat healthy, and the focus is eating healthy, so we see the character eating salads and lean meats and that sort of thing, and then exercising, kids will internalize that of, oh, this person didn't like the number on the scale, and then they did these things, and that's how they'll gain that cultural script of what to do for that situation. So, I mean, I don't know. There's just, in general, though, I really think that particular clip, that specific clip, was a bit subtle for most young children.
For fat issues, I'm talking about self-hate, I'm talking about potential EDs. It all starts here, as innocuous and as realistic and as relatable as it seems.
If you don't think that they don't see parents that are dissatisfied with their weight. I had a parent that dieted and didn't. She did some things that I remember I found very distressing as a child. And that's probably where you should take, like, if the child seems distressed by what you're doing, then that's time to sit down with the child and talk with them. And maybe evaluate what you're doing. Something that never distressed me as a child, and happened a little bit later when my parent was being a bit healthier about it, was my mom switched from big breakfasts to like protein smoothies in the morning. And didn't upset me, didn't bother me at all. I actually was never a big eater in the morning because my stomach just is too sensitive, so I had protein bars. So so it's just the I didn't eat cereal a lot of the time like regular kids. Like after like age 7 or whatever, she would always buy these things, these bars called balance bars, and this is when balance bars were still like decent, not what they are now. But there was a chocolate one that was really good, and then a lemon one that was really good. And she kept those stocked in the house for me, and that was my breakfast with a cup of milk, and that was my breakfast, and I liked it. That was I liked having that for breakfast every day. It was light enough that it didn't upset my stomach, and I was getting protein first thing in the morning. So, like, I don't think that everything that is in relation to weight loss has to be bad. I think if you frame it as choices and you frame it as a preference, because some people just prefer smoothies or something in the morning, it's not a big deal. There's ways to frame things. I think with kids, it's all about the framing of the situation. If this person sees that their weight isn't what they want it to be and become obsessive, that's going to have a more negative impact on the kids than if they saw that their weight wasn't what they wanted it to be and then they made healthier choices.
This stuff is toxic, and it starts with what we show our kids on television shows like this. Do I think the creators of this episode have any particular ill will or malice in creating the scene the way that they did? No, I don't. But anti-fat bias permeates almost all of culture, and it comes out when you're not paying attention. So I'm disappointed. Am I going to stop watching Bluey? No, I'm not going to stop watching Bluey, but I'm definitely going to have a conversation with my kids when that episode eventually makes its...
I think you're taking this entirely too far. I don't think that the clip was anything that required this level of reaction. If you didn't like it, you didn't like it. Maybe you just won't show your kids that episode. I don't think that it was bad, but it's your comfort level, what you show your kids. I think that teaching kids, this is how you may feel at some point in the future. This is how the adults in your life may feel. And here's an example of how the adult should handle it, or here is a healthy representation of someone changing themselves for the better, is still a good message to send to the kids. If you have a problem with that, because that it's not like he suddenly went on a starvation diet or anything. The dad character looked at his weight, was disappointed, and then went back to brushing his teeth. That's not that's not a bad thing to show kids. Adults are disappointed in themselves sometimes. They're likely going to have an adult in their life that's trying to lose weight and is disappointed by seeing the number on the scale. And normalizing that for the kids so that way they're not bothered by their adult being sad, at least not to the same extent as they would be if they had no warning of what this sort of thing would. I don't think it's a bad thing.
How fat do you need to get to start feeling shame before you make a change?
So the comment says, so how fat do you need to get to start feeling shame before you make a change? Waiting for your health to decline is dumb.
If shaming fat people made them thin, there would be no more fat people.
So there's a little bit of a difference there of shaming and then the person feeling shamed. There's a little bit of difference there. Feeling an internalized sense of shame. I don't know if I agree that you should feel shame for being fat. I don't necessarily, like, if you want to change, if you're fat and you don't like it and you want to change, that's totally fine. Feeling shame is just, can be such a antithesis to change. So it kind of depends on what works for the person, but feeling shame and being shamed are two different things. And I agree that if, like, shaming people isn't the answer. But I do agree with the commenter saying waiting for your health to decline before you make a change to your lifestyle is dumb. I would agree with that. Preventative medicine is best. So leading a healthy lifestyle, getting down to a healthy weight is the ideal. Whether shame should be anywhere in that equation, I tend to think no. But for some people, shame is a big motivator, so it kind of depends on the person.
The word you're looking for is criticize, not cancel.
The comment says, the fact that people are canceling because a fat suit is honestly pathetic.
I criticize people because of the use of fat suits. I can't cancel anybody. Use the right word.
I need to save this clip because it feels a bit pedantic.
If you ever hear
So the comment says, me personally would want to be as fit and healthy as possible to be alive long enough to watch my grandkids grow up.
someone talk about anti-fat bias or fat phobia, and you're like, what? That doesn't exist. That's not a real thing in America now. This is what it looks like the vast majority of the time. It's this societal, culturally ingrained belief that fat people are just going to drop dead at some point. I thought it when I was a kid. All of media and people were like, oh, if you're fat, you're just going to die young. I'm almost 40. I'm showing no signs of stopping. People drop dead, unfortunately, young, due to any number of reasons, often, and not always because they're fat. This is garbage. This is anti-fat bias. Learn to see it. Please stop doing it. If you ever hear someone talk about,
It's really unfortunate that you view this as anti-fat bias. Like, I don't think there was anything wrong with this comment at all. And I think something that FAs confuse is when we say, for this example, this person, me personally would want to be as fit and healthy as possible to be alive long enough to watch my grandkids grow up. They're not only taking into account just being alive, they're taking into account the quality of life. I'm sure there's plenty of fat people that live long enough to see their grandkids grow up to a degree, at least, if not fully grown. But how many of them can play with their grandkids? Like, physically, actively play with their grandkids? How comfortable are they in their body? They don't have, like, the aches and pains that come with obesity and age. And not only that, but you're like, I'm 40 and I show no signs of stopping. 40 isn't what we mean necessarily when we say you're going to die young, because young is kind of a relative term. ProfBrainFever is big. He is not so big that I think he would die before the age of 55. And I don't know his level of activity, which would also play a role. Dying young is kind of subjective in where we place the marker. For me, young would be before retirement age. And, that's just how I would mark a premature death. And the reason why I say that is because, my family has a little practical magic thing going on. All the women in my family look 10 years younger than we are and live into our 80s and 90s. All the men in my family look 10 years older than they are, typically suffer with worse health, and I think only one man in the past 5 generations has lived to see retirement age. And that's due to a variety of poor life choices that the men in my family just tend to make. But being fat and dying young, I would not necessarily say 40. Like, your body's probably going to start feeling the effects of obesity, but you're not going to feel the dangers of it just yet. You're getting there, but you're not going to feel it just yet. And not only that, but you're like, I show no signs of stopping. I don't think they realize, and maybe I know this because I cared for elderly family members, when things go downhill, it can be lightning fast. It can be lightning fast. Depending on your healthcare, depending on how soon you can get help, depending on the interventions available, and depending on your own personal choices, the rate of which you decline can change. But if you choose to ignore it at any level, you can have a rapid decline in health very quickly. So, and while I agree that people can die young for a variety of reasons, and that's very true, being obese isn't just a matter of dying young, it's a matter of the quality of life before you die. And that's part of the reason why people work out and want to maintain a healthy weight. And I would argue that being healthy into old age requires two things. One, a healthy weight I do think is important. Actually, three things. A healthy weight, regular doctor checkups, and strength training. Because I don't remember the statistic, but there was a statistic that showed that one of the major reasons why older people end up in some sort of care facility or something is because they can no longer get up on their own, which is because of muscle atrophy. So being able to still do things for yourself requires muscle and a healthy weight, I would say. But that's me.
I'm a big fan of the Percy Jackson series. I'm really excited that they're going to adapt it to a television show on Disney Plus. And if you're like me, you're already looking ahead that if this is a success, they can do all of the Percy Jackson series and then go into the sequel series, The Heroes of Olympus and then The Trials of Apollo. But one thing I'm not looking forward to, particularly if they go on and adapt The Heroes of Olympus, is the anti-fat bias, particularly in this book. Spoilers for Percy Jackson, The Heroes of Olympus, and all of Rick Riordan's work. In the Heroes of Olympic series, we're introduced to a character named Frank, who is a fat young man. He is still strong, he has powers, he's brave, he has a tactical mind. An incredibly fun and relatable character for a fat young man like myself. Unfortunately, in the House of Hades, he gets the blessing of his father Mars, and what does that blessing do? It magically makes him tall, muscular, and skinny. Really, Uncle Rick? And no, this is not me canceling Rick Riordan or the Percy Jackson series. This is not me saying that we shouldn't read and enjoy those books, because I do read and enjoy those books. But it's just sad that the one fat main character they give us can't stay fat, is in fact rewarded by magically becoming thin. I just think it sends the wrong message, and it makes me sad thinking about it. I kind of hope that if they do adapt this to the series, that when they cast Frank, they just cast a thin person, because the alternatives will suck even more.
So I do want to say I'm glad that he can like something and still have criticism of it, because I don't think we've seen that much up until this point. So I think that he genuinely likes the Percy Jackson series, and I'm glad that while he may have a problem with this one thing, he's not crying that, the entire series is fatphobic and therefore garbage. On the note himself, now granted, I haven't read the Percy Jackson series. It just missed me as a kid, and I just never went back to it myself, or never went to it in the first place myself. But when it comes to, the blessing of his, what was it, patron god, parent god, whatever. If it's Mars, Mars is the god of war. Suddenly becoming tall, muscular, and thin, and therefore more agile, means that he was more of a warrior's physique. Because Mars is the god of war. So the warrior physique is kind of emblematic of Mars's power. If he were to suddenly get tall, muscular, and skinny, and his father was Hephaestus, then we would have more to talk about, because Hephaestus was not necessarily known for being tall, and then he is the blacksmithing god 100%, and his wife is Aphrodite, and so if you want to go into that whole thing and the affair between Aphrodite and Mars, and or it was Aphrodite and Ares, or Venus and Mars, depending on how you want to go there. And I guess Hephaestus, if we're going with Roman names, would be Vulcan. But beside the point, then you would have more of a leg to stand on. If that was his big blessing, that makes zero sense. And yes, I would agree, it seems out there and for no reason. But because his father was Mars, the god of war, it only makes sense that his blessing turns his son into a magical paragon of warrior readiness.
I was listening to a new episode of Maintenance Phase, and apparently, in other countries, it is not common practice to weigh you at every single doctor appointment. What? You mean that thing that contributes to the fact that fat people very often avoid going to doctors? That thing is uniquely American? Because of course it fucking is. I was listening to a new episode of
Because it's maintenance phase, and while they do some decent research, some of the research is highly suspect as well. So I would need to look into this myself. However, if I were to make some guesses about why Americans are weighed more often at the doctor than others, there's a couple of different things. One, we have a huge obesity epidemic issue. That's a reason why everyone could be weighed. Another is that I would bet, given universal health care in other countries, skipping doctor's visits is less common. And so there's less need to weigh someone every time they come if they're coming more often. And I can't say for sure, but I am wondering how connected the system is in other countries versus how connected the healthcare record system is here. In which case, if you have a PCP and then you go to a specialist, that specialist can be at a different hospital, and the network doesn't always connect and send full records, and so they have to validate everything at their office and input it into the system. So there's a couple of different reasons why I could see that. I don't think that's just the insinuation that I'm getting here is it's because America hates fat people. I don't think that that's what it is. There's some other issues within the American healthcare system that would necessitate weighing someone every time they come into the doctor's office. But that's my opinion. That's just, without any research, that's what comes to mind off the top of my head.
At a theme park with the family, and I gotta say, I actually appreciate several of the rides. The smaller rides have a sign that includes maximum weight for a rider. And while I would wish that there were more rides available for my fat friends and myself, I do appreciate that I don't have to stand in an interminably long line to then find out that my ass is too big to get on that particular kiddie coaster. At a theme...
Actually, this is, for once, and this is where we're going to end the video for today. For once, we actually agree. I am all for signage that lets someone make an informed choice before wasting their time and facing potential humiliation, because I do think that it would be very embarrassing to wait in line, get all the way up, only to realize that you're too fat for the roller coaster or the ride, whatever it is. So I'm actually all in favor of having, minimum height and weight as well as maximum height and weight signs near the forming line for whatever ride you want to get on. I actually think that that's really ideal. So that way it allows someone to make a choice for themselves. They can either risk it saying, oh, I'm on the borderline, I'm going to try, and if they get turned away, then they get turned away. Or they can see it straight off saying, okay, I'm not going to waste my time with this, we'll go do something else. And that way it doesn't turn into, one, them wasting their time in line, and two, they can just move on with their life. I'm in favor of that. I agree with him here. So that ends the video for today. I'm thinking this is going to be cut down considerably. I've been recording for an hour, but I think it's going to be cut down pretty considerably because I skipped so much. We're all the way in July. It should only take us maybe one more video to finish off ProfBrainFever, and then we can move on to someone else. I'll probably do another maintenance phase reaction before we do that. But some quick life updates. I have not finished the macrame rug, and it turns out it looks like it's going to form really short, so you guys are probably going to be wondering how come it took her 2 months to make something this size, and it just did. I've been recording myself inking and refining the drawings of some of my Inktober stuff, so that's what's going to be put up with the next maintenance phase reaction are these videos of me inking and putting together all my Inktober sketches and artwork and all that. And my weekend, not my weekend, but I mean last weekend and the week fucking sucked. And I kind of put a community post out about it, but I broke things, I made mistakes and bad choices, and cat died, and I had to dig a grave, and it was fucking awful. I had the librarian that I am an assistant to was out 4 days of the week, and I had to sub. But guess what? I didn't get paid to be a sub. Nope, I still got paid my classified rate, not the certificated teacher sub rate, which would have only been the difference of about $25 for the day, but I'm still like, I've subbed 3 times now. That's $75 that I kind of feel robbed of, but whatever. Like, I'm just a little annoyed. I'm like, why do I have to do higher class work and not get paid the sub rate for it? I'm not even asking to get paid like the teacher salary rate, just the sub rate. But whatever. I'm annoyed. So let's talk about something a bit happier. And that is, alright, we're going to cover what I'm reading. You Mustn't, Your Majesty is one that I got a couple of free tickets for. And it's about a knight that has now gone around 5 different timelines trying to save the prince whom she serves, and has failed 4 times so far, so she's trying to keep him alive. And it seems like might be following for her. I'm actually far more interested in the time traveling aspect than I am the romance of this one. But like, she keeps anticipating things. She was a knight before, but this time she went in as a maid as a way to better protect the prince. So very interesting. The Mistress Runs Away is proving to be better than I expected, because she's not falling, like, he did a 180 after about 5 years when he realized he would been kind of an asshole, but his way of fixing things is still almost psychotic in certain ways. Like, it's weird. And she doesn't want it. And so she's kind of trying to live her own life, staying away from it. Like, I like where this is going so far. She seems to be becoming a stronger character. I'm actually really hoping she doesn't end up with him. And it's showing to be promising. Hawar in the Winter Garden is so far seeming kind of basic, but we'll see how that turns out. Watch Out for the Dream Demon is a boy love series. I am a big fan of like dream demon stories, and this guy has like 100% chance of dreams, and so he keeps trying to feed on his dreams, but this kid has fucking talismans that make him unable to do anything. And I think in the meantime, like, he's falling for him, and he's just happy to, because he was sick his entire childhood, so he's just happy to socialize with his peers. So that's its own thing. That's kind of fun. Could the boy next door be a vampire? This is just, it's another boy love one, but it's okay. Like, I wouldn't mind reading a little bit more of it, but I'm not super invested. Your Majesty, Please Spare Me this time is following roughly the way I thought it would be. I'm still absolutely in love with divorcing my tyrant husband. That is the shit. I love this. I haven't gotten any further in Villainous's Revenge is Sweeter Than Honey. I haven't gotten any farther in that one, or Becoming You, or The Duchess Who Sees Ghosts, or Return Survival. But Beloved by My In-Laws is really good. Tied to You is showing more promise. The Empress Wants to Avoid the Emperor is wonderful. I love it. I Woke Up as the Ugly Duckling is taking a serious, like, turn that I was not expecting. I was not expecting, like, devil summoning to become part of this thing, and contracts with the devil to enter this realm, but it did. And I'm, like, not sure how I feel about it, and there's still a lot of mystery to what's going on. So that's interesting. And then I think I already removed it from my Time Till Free. I did. Ashart is still becoming even more interesting, but I haven't reached the point where she looks like this, like an adult yet. We're still where she's very much a child. So I'm still figuring that out, what's going on, where's the main plot line of our story. We haven't quite gotten there yet. Like, it's interesting. There's still stuff that's happening and it's interesting, but it's like, what is like the big setup? Because right now it still feels like we're getting a huge amount of like explanation and build up to what's going to be the main story. One that I didn't remove from here was Villainous Violet. It was apparently like a 90 chapter series. I was at chapter 24 and I'm like, it should be wrapping up now, because like the story itself seemed to be wrapping up, and if it was going to go in another direction, it didn't appear that way. It seemed like it was going to wrap up at like around chapter 20, and then I read like 4 more chapters and it's still kind of just dragging on, and I just could not get into it, so I dropped that one. I left it because it just was not... it just was not holding my interest. So that's about it, I think. Oh, one more as I'm looking through. So the Girl in the Group was fucking boring, but A Marriage Alliance for Revenge is really good as well. It's building up. These two are starting to fall in love, but while they're starting to fall in love and stuff, it's more like, good, we are actually developing feelings for each other, so our act will be that much better to get revenge on the current king. Like, there is romance, but the romance clearly takes a backseat to their plot for revenge, and I love it. So, okay, now I think that's it. Thank you so much for watching. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time.